Nobody expected Tony Stewart to become one of the loudest voices after Kyle Busch's death. But now, he's speaking out. And according to Stewart, the people he blames the most aren't in the garage. They're sitting in the grandstands. Because nearly a month after Kyle Busch's death, Tony Stewart says the way people are reacting now is exactly what bothers him the most. And what he just said has created a massive debate across NASCAR. Did fans unfairly judge Kyle Busch for years, or did Tony Stewart go way too far? Here's what happened. Ever since Kyle Busch passed away, NASCAR has been flooded with tributes. Drivers have shared memories. Former rivals have talked about his kindness. Teams have posted emotional messages. Fans who once booed him have been leaving flowers, writing tributes, and talking about the impact he had on the sport. For many people, it has been a chance to remember a complicated but legendary figure. But according to Tony Stewart, something about this entire reaction doesn't sit right with him. Because in his mind, the person everyone is praising today is the same person who existed all along. The difference is that people are only paying attention now. While speaking with reporters this week, Stewart delivered one of the most emotional comments we've heard since Kyle's passing. He said, "I guess the biggest thing in this tragedy that's happened that pisses me off the most is that now everybody wants to talk about how he was as a person." And Stewart wasn't finished. He continued, outside of that, all they wanted to do is judge what they saw on TV. It's frustrating. Those comments immediately got people's attention. Because for years, Kyle Busch was one of the most polarizing drivers NASCAR has ever seen. Fans either loved him or they couldn't stand him. Kyle Busch won at almost every level of NASCAR, but his aggressive style and willingness to speak his mind also made him one of the sport's most divisive figures. He didn't run away from that reputation either. In many ways, he leaned into it and became NASCAR's ultimate villain. And when crowds booed him, he rarely tried to change their minds. Kyle was unapologetically himself, but Stewart believes people made up their minds without ever trying to understand who Kyle really was. And that's where his frustration comes from. Stewart raced against Busch for years. Stewart's perspective is different because he knew Kyle beyond race weekends. Over the years, he saw a side of Busch that rarely made television, including the relationships he built and the way he treated people when the cameras were gone. And in Stewart's opinion, that side of Kyle existed the entire time. People simply didn't want to look for it. Then Stewart delivered another statement that has been quoted everywhere across NASCAR. That's the way every one of us are judged by what they see on TV, and then once you die, they want to talk about how good a person you were. And then he said the line that really ignited this debate. Should have given him a chance to learn him as a person before they judged him in the first place. Those words hit hard, because in the weeks since Kyle's passing, story after story has emerged. People have talked about private acts of kindness. Others have remembered conversations that changed their careers. Some recalled him helping younger drivers behind the scenes. There have been stories about mentorship and support that never made headlines. According to Stewart, none of those things suddenly became true after Kyle died. They were always true. The public simply never saw them, and that's why he became emotional. In fact, Stewart made it clear that he isn't interested in trying to educate people now. He said, "So, right now, I don't care about educating everybody about how Kyle Busch was. I know how Kyle Busch was." Then came his bluntest comment of all. The fact that they all want to learn now, they're the a-holes for not taking the time to learn him and accept him for who he was back then. That statement exploded online. Some fans agreed with him. They argued that people often judge athletes based only on television moments and never consider who they might be away from the spotlight. Others believed Stewart had a point, even if he delivered it in an extremely harsh way. But plenty of fans pushed back. Some argued that ordinary people never had the opportunity to know Kyle personally. They only knew the version of him that appeared on television every weekend. And honestly, that's not an unreasonable argument either. Fans don't spend time in the garage. At the same time, many fans would argue that they can only react to the version of drivers that they are shown. They aren't part of the garage, they don't hear private conversations, and they don't know what happens behind the scenes. Most opinions are formed from races, interviews, and public moments. That's how sports have always worked. Some fans even called on Stewart to apologize for his remarks. Others said he was unfairly blaming people who are genuinely saddened by Kyle's death. And a few believed both sides were missing the bigger picture. Because grief is complicated. Sometimes people don't realize someone's impact until they're gone. Sometimes it takes hearing stories from family, friends, and competitors before they understand a person differently. That doesn't necessarily mean the sadness isn't real. But Tony Stewart isn't really talking about grief. The point Stewart was trying to make is that athletes are often placed into simple categories far too quickly. In his view, Kyle Busch spent years being defined by a public image that never fully captured who he really was. And from his perspective, Kyle Busch spent years carrying labels that didn't tell the whole story. For Stewart, that's the painful part. He believes NASCAR is finally celebrating a person who never actually changed. The public's understanding changed. And maybe that's why his comments sounded so raw. That's partly why Stewart's comments sounded so raw. Rather than delivering a polished tribute, he spoke like someone who was still processing the loss of a friend and struggling with how that friend had been perceived for years. It sounded like a friend who is still grieving and struggling with the way people viewed someone he knew personally. Whether fans agree with him or not, one thing is undeniable. Tony Stewart's comments have forced NASCAR to have an uncomfortable conversation. How much do we really know about the athletes we watch every week? How often do we decide who someone is based entirely on television? And how many stories never get told until it's too late? For years, Kyle Busch embraced being misunderstood. Now, after his passing, people are discovering stories that paint a much more complete picture of the man behind the helmet. And according to Tony Stewart, that's exactly what should have happened long before now. But what do you think? Did Tony Stewart go too far with his comments? Or is he right that NASCAR fans judged Kyle Busch without ever truly knowing him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another NASCAR story.